All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to RevOps Talks. In fact, that's our first edition for RevOps Talks, and I have the real pleasure to welcome as my first guest, Scott Brinker, who is the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot. And by the way, Scott has some other very interesting pieces of his background. Probably he's going to share some of them later in this talk. But something very curious about him also is that, in fact, he's the editor of the website chiefmartech.com. And I think, are you one of the founders, Scott, of this website, or how did it?
I am the only person of this website.
The only person.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, yeah. It's an amazing website with a lot of insights, which I'm following regularly, and would recommend anyone who hasn't really been following it to start following it, because really it's a whole new universe. So, Scott, welcome. A question to you. An evolution or a revolution is what we are seeing today in the world of marketing and sales, technology and operations?
Yeah, I think my answer would be it was a revolution that is now being followed by incredibly rapid evolution. And the big revolution of this, was the direct connections that now existed through all these digital channels between, our buyers and sellers. Enormous power transfer moved to buyers. The decades ago, so much power resided with the sellers, and the buyers had to try and squeeze out information, and they were very much at the mercy, of whatever process the sellers wanted to run. In the digital world, the buyers just have so much power to research things, to connect with, other customers and peers, and, sort of self-serve their own, journey. Basically, it's completely changed the power dynamics, and it's really put the onus on sellers to do a tremendous job of supporting those buyers. So that was the big revolution. But boy, here in MarTech and sales tech, the speed by which we continue to refine what's possible there and how we orchestrate it, and the channels and the preferences that buyers have, it doesn't slow down.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now, this industry nowadays is booming, right? But when you were starting back then, it wasn't like this, right?
It's interesting. So when I really started, I got into this when the internet, the web revolution was first happening, the first .com boom, and so I think there was definitely a lot of recognition that, oh, wow, yeah, the future of software is going to be, on the web and the internet. We kind of knew that this would be a new channel for marketers and salespeople, but these two different organizations, like our IT and our software, teams, and our marketing and sales teams, just organizationally, they were just in very different spaces. They weren't really collaborating well together. I mean, it was just all so new and so different from what they'd each, had before. And so, when I first got into this, it was because, my role, at a web development agency was kind of serving as the bridge between the marketers who would hire my agency, and then the IT team at that organization that my team would then have to go work with, because, hey, listen, just because marketing can dream it, we still have to actually deliver it in the context of, the systems that IT is running. So those were some fun early days of doing shuttle diplomacy between those two different professions.
But has it always been like that? Like, when did you see the potential that technology, operations, and on the other hand, marketing and sales are so interconnected?
Yeah, I think it really accelerated in that period between early 2000s to the beginning of 2010s. A lot of this was driven by, for instance, with Google and a combination of search engine optimization organically, but then also PPC, paid advertising. All of a sudden, this ability to say, oh, we can have all these different digital touch points through Google, and then, we can experiment rapidly, and then we can drive traffic, to other experiences, and we can start to optimize customize this and understand the journey. And then we can have email at the beginning of marketing automation, was just starting to emerge of like, oh, then we get the contacts and then we start nurturing them. So I would say over that 10-year period, over that first decade in this century, there was a lot of just awareness that started to come together of like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. This is going to be big. And then it's been the past decade, of like the 2010s to where we are now, where, yeah, I think we got past the revolution and it now started to be like, okay, now let's really evolve, how effectively we can do this.
Yeah, you are in fact the author. I'm trying to download one image about the marketing technology landscape. That I think you are in the root of creation this, right?
Yep, we're doing so that was a project. Yeah, I started, my goodness, 2010, 2011, and we did almost every year. We skipped last year. And we're now in the process of producing a new one here for 2022. And yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better representation as an artifact of like how dramatically the space of, that's it, of marketing technology has changed from, 10 years ago, there were maybe a couple hundred solutions here.
Yeah.
This was in 2020, right? This was 2 years ago. There was 8,000, and I don't want to give anything away, but we're working on the 2022 one, and all I will say is it has not shrunk.
Yeah, in fact, if let's imagine the following situation right now, specifically here in Bulgaria, we have a booming ecosystem. Technology startups are booming right now, and a lot of them are right now on their way to choose the solution, the tech, or the tech stack as a whole that they are going to be working with in the marketing, sales, and customer service departments. What would you recommend them? Like, what should they be looking for in terms of, I don't know whether tools, but functionalities, what they should be careful about? Like, can you give several tips about that?
Yeah, with the caveat that it is hard to distill the answer to that question into a 2-minute soundbite, but I think there are sort of two things I would recommend. First of all is to step back from the technologies. Like don't look at that landscape right away. The main thing you want to understand is like, what are the capabilities we need to be able to serve our particular customers and our particular audience, and look at that very broadly, not just from an acquisition, of new leads, but like, the whole process of acquiring them, nurturing them, engaging them, converting them, making them happy, successful, repeat customers, advocates for you, and if you sort of look across that entire journey and you're trying to understand, okay, how do we deliver on that? How do we engage that and just get really clear about what capabilities you need? Then that sort of becomes, the checklist when you're evaluating technology solutions. You're like, okay, well, what's going to actually give us this capability? Best way, best price. So that's one thing, is definitely be capability driven, not tech driven. The second thing would be, and I'm biased here. I mean, this is the work I do at HubSpot, is I'm a very big believer in platform ecosystems in MarTech. Is one of the challenges we had with this explosion of all these different, apps in MarTech, is that initially many of them weren't very well connected, and so even if their own capabilities were like very powerful, it put a lot of burden on the shoulders of marketers to figure out, okay, yes, that piece is a great piece, but how do we connect this with everything else? And the solution I think that we've seen emerge in the market is to say, okay, if you have at the center of your stack, a platform that can really act as the orchestration, across these different apps, and then these different apps integrate to that platform, this kind of becomes a pathway to get the best of both worlds, where you can get the specialized features from any given app in an ecosystem, but you can also have them like connected together so they're bringing data to one common system of record. You can run your automations in a way that, orchestrate across them. And I definitely recommend looking at platform options, at the center of your MarTech stack.
But usually, even if you have a platform, I know even in HubSpot, I think you have some research about that most successful companies using HubSpot have around a specific number of applications that are connected to the platform itself, right?
Yes, I think the last thing we had publicly published was on average, HubSpot customers install like 7 other apps that they integrate to the platform. And actually, if you think about it, I don't think we were able to publicly share this data, but you can kind of imagine it being a long tail distribution where, for a lot of small businesses, when they're just getting started, they maybe don't need to connect another app. They might be able to do everything they need in HubSpot, or if they do, they like connecting maybe 1 or 2 apps. But then as they grow larger, and they end up with more and more use cases and more specialized needs, they start to add more and more apps, orchestrated through the platform.
In fact, you are leading the solution ecosystem of HubSpot. In fact, all those different applications that you're integrating with HubSpot. Can you give us what the trends of solution ecosystems would be, and what should we expecting in terms of HubSpot when it comes to its ecosystem of solutions? I know that it's been forecast for it to grow even faster than HubSpot, right?
Yep. So I do want to just distinguish terminology. So we have a whole channel of service partners who we actually call solutions partners. And so that's a team that I collaborate with, but that's a little bit different than my team, which is really focused on software partners, companies who are either integrating or building an app, specifically for the HubSpot platform. And so, we've seen tremendous growth in that space. We have over 1,000 partners now in this app marketplace, and it does continue to grow. I think, so many interesting trends we could talk about. I think one that I'm particularly excited about is it's not just about marketing and sales tools. What we're starting to see more and more of is the integration of other business applications into the stack, be it my finance or accounting systems or my ERP or, all these other things that, getting this knowledge and insight of the complete customer experience, not just the part marketing and sales is doing, but what's happening with customer support, what's happening with product operations. If we've got a digital product, being plugged into those interactions, how's this going from a finance perspective? What is the actual lifetime value of a customer? Where are they in paying their bills to us? From an ERP perspective, what's our ability, to deliver what the customer wants in the time frame they want? All these things are getting just more and more interconnected, and this just creates more and more power for organizations that are trying to leverage all these different digital pieces of their stack together.
Yeah, which is amazing, by the way. We're living in so interconnected world, and with relation to that, you are often using in your presentations and articles you're sharing the term big ops, right?
Yep.
Can you share a little bit more what big ops is, Scott?
Yeah, so this realization occurred to me because I kept seeing more and more people with the name ops in their job title, and it's there's marketing ops and sales ops, and then customer service ops and partner ops, and then of course we have DevOps and product ops, and then there's ML ops and security ops and data ops and partner ops, and all of a sudden you see all these emergence of these ops specialties, and what they all seem to generally have in common, is it's this new generation of professionals that's able to leverage digital systems and automation and things of this kind to orchestrate what is happening in the digital business. And these are net new capabilities that for a lot of these things just didn't exist, or if they did exist, they were an Excel spreadsheet version, And so part of it was, as I just saw all these different ops teams emerging, but sharing some of that similar DNA, it struck me that, in the past decade, we talked a lot about big data this idea of like, oh yeah, just the amount of data, you know, that organizations have to work with is just going to grow exponentially. So how do we manage that? You know, and we're not completely done with that yet, but, you know, we kind of got our arms around, you know, that this next wave isn't big data. This next wave is big ops. And it's all about, you know, those capabilities for executing things on top of all of that data, for all the actual operational orchestration happening through these digital systems. And so to me, that's, yeah, hopefully big ops is a semi-catchy way of saying like, oh yeah, big data, check. Big ops, this is the next mission.
Yeah, all right. And in relation to that, a lot of people are transitioning or starting. You said it. In fact, a lot of people are starting to have ops in their role, in their job title. We have marketing ops, sales ops, revenue operations, and so many more. With this changing landscape of marketing technology, sales technology, service technology, what should people who are working in this world know about the future so that they can adapt their skill sets in order to be, you know, most competitive?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of all in a state now where the single greatest skill we have, both as individuals, but also as organizations, is the ability to learn new skills. You know, and this goes back to where we started. We were talking revolution or evolution. You know, a revolution, you know, is a big change, but it kind of has the advantage that like, okay, we did the revolution, we adapted, and now the revolution is complete. And now, you know, things settle down versus, you know, evolution, and particularly at the pace we see it, it's a much more continuous process. And at least from everything I see, I don't think we're slowing down on the pace of change, what's happening in technology, or, you know, people's expectations of how they'll use that technology in their work or in their buyer relationships with sellers. And so because that we're still in a mode here where there's probably a lot of change, you know, ahead on the next 10 years, is the people who seem to be most successful in this environment are those who are just willing to like continually learn. Like, hey, wow, okay, what's this new thing? How would I use this? How does this work? You know, and I want to distinguish that this is not shiny object syndrome, which, you know, I think sometimes, you know, that's been the joke made of MarTech of, oh, look, some shiny new tool, let's go figure that out. I don't think that's actually true. I think like actually most marketers and most MarTech people are very pragmatic. They are looking for competitive advantage for their organization. They're looking for ways to have an impact, you know, and in a world where the technology that we have to leverage is continuing to evolve very rapidly, I think people who are willing to embrace that, not for the sake of the technology itself, but very much through the lens of like, what's the business opportunity here? How can we extract value, you know, by looking at this? Those people have an enormous edge in the marketplace now.
All right. And, you know, if we take a look at one revenue operations department, it has those enablement people, it has purely operational people, it has technology people, and so on. Among those roles, which of those roles do you see as the most critical and crucial one in the trends that are going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years? And before maybe you answering, I have another image here that maybe we can discuss later.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, we can get to this image, but I think from a RevOps perspective, you know, if we said like, okay, well, there's enablement, there's the operations, there's the technology systems, you know, which of those, you know, is the most important for, you know, that evolution? Boy, it's kind of hard to say, because I feel like if you're missing any one of those three pieces, it's almost like having a stool that has 3 legs, and like, yeah, if you kind of take away one of those legs, I wouldn't sit on that. You know, so maybe I can just answer the question a slightly different way, which is to say, which is the piece of it that I think is often underestimated? And that's pretty easy. To me, it's the enablement. And it goes back to what we were just chatting about, from skill development and training and ability to learn, is the technology you can buy, and the operations piece, there are now a growing pool of professionals who actually understand, how to orchestrate these operations. We want more of them, but, they're out there. But this mission about enablement is all too often underestimated, that if we really want to harness the value out of the technology, we've got to empower more and more people in the organization to harness, the capabilities that these technologies give us. And if you underinvest on enablement, it's like having this beautiful, Ferrari, but it spends its time sitting in the garage, and there's no one who actually knows how to drive it and, take it out for fun.
All right. And as for that, again, it's very individual. It depends on the company. But let's say if a company invests a certain amount of money in implementation of specific tools, then what would you recommend in terms of adoption? What is the usual period of time when people should be alert that they're, totally learning new things? They're transforming the way they are, working in this organization, and they should be 100% focused on really changing their process, their, reflex in the way they are working.
Yeah, well, this is why enablement is, it's easy to say, but it's actually very hard to execute well. First of all, because there's not just one universal playbook. It really does depend on the solution. What is the scope of it? For the people who are adopting it, what percentage of their existing work, is going to rely on that? Is there some existing process that they understand and we're changing the process? You can have some adoptions that, if they're highly focused for a particular capability for a particular team, it's not necessarily replacing an existing solution that everyone has, embedded, in their, synapses, then, you can have adoption happen incredibly rapidly. But if you've got something like, again, like this CRM system that, you've got 1,000 people who are used to working a particular way with a particular system, and now we're going to replace this out with a new system that's better, and the processes are better, but still all these people who are used to doing it a certain way, helping to coach them and guide them through to the new way. And very often, right, you don't have the luxury of just stopping business for, all right, well, let's take this quarter off and we'll spend the time swapping it out and everyone can be learned, and then we'll restart business, the quarter after that. No, you kind of have to do this. It's what they say, replacing the engines while the plane is in, flight. This is challenging stuff when you're doing it on those large scale.
Yeah, absolutely would agree with you. And okay, we did this with the most undervalued skill. Let's say, what about functionality? What about feature? What is the most undervalued type of tool, category of tool, or if you want feature, that you would say is something that brings a lot of value really, but still not a lot of people and organizations are realizing it?
Whew, wow, yeah. Again, it's super hard to generalize. I will give one example that I think is an opportunity. But yeah, some companies will be way ahead on this journey, others won't, which is, I think, this idea of, as a category, automation. Because we're starting to get comfortable with the idea of automating individual tasks. And there's a whole bunch of tools that we can use to automate a particular task. But in many ways, that's almost like the lowest level of the pyramid of what, digital automation enables. That actually where things start to get really exciting with digital automation is when it's not just automating individual tasks, but it's starting to orchestrate entire processes, not only to accelerate them, but also to provide greater visibility to it, provide greater consistency to it, really be able to instrument, the entire end-to-end process. That I think we are actually, it's interesting. The technology exists today to already do this. It's actually very widespread technology, but understanding how to implement this and leverage it and really get value out of it, I think most companies are still pretty early on their journey there.
Yeah. where do you see, in fact, artificial intelligence is booming today as well, and it's probably going to continue with this upper trend. Do you see a lot of intersection between our marketing and sales technology and artificial intelligence, and in fact, it being adopted by organizations?
Yes. And the funny thing about this is very often the best artificial intelligence is the things people don't even realize is artificial intelligence, that it basically just sort of like magically seeps into the background. So I mean, everything from lead scoring, or predictions of lifetime value or churn propensity, or I don't know, like with sales tech, like when you have conversational intelligence solutions that aren't just like recording calls and transcribing them, but being able to pull out highlights and next steps and identify this. As people use these tools, they don't really even think about it as being AI. All they know is like, oh, yeah, cool, that was easy. Oh, yeah, wow, this just works. Great. Oh, that's an insight. Machine learning just pops up something. Oh, hey, yeah, cool, that's great, thank you. So I actually think it's pretty widely adopted. It's just not always widely recognized, and that's probably a good thing.
Gotcha. All right, let's get back now to this image that I shared earlier about the trends that we are seeing. I think it's been done by chiefmartech.com, right? It's your
you did that with the folks at WPP.
All right, great. So here we're taking a look at 5 trends in marketing technology for the decade ahead. Let's discuss that. What should make us an impression when we are taking a look at that? What are going to be really the changes? What's going to drive us in the next decade ahead?
Yeah, so that was kind of the mission of this project, and there was actually a whole research paper that I co-created with the team at WPP on this, and it was trying to step back and look at like, okay, what are 5 big things happening in the world of marketing and marketing technology that are here today? Like, we actually see them today. It's not like, oh, someday in the future. No, like here today, we actually see this stuff, but we can also expect that, like, wow, over the rest of this decade, these trends are only going to accelerate, and play really dominant roles, in how marketing and marketing tech works. And so the 5 things that I felt were the big ones, was this whole thing around no code, and I mean this very broadly, not just like, oh, I can build an app without code. No, I can do I can do data analysis. I can do like avatar creation. I can do machine learning. It's just like, I don't need to be a coding expert in order to harness, more and more of the technological innovation that's out there. So that thing's huge. This whole thing about platforms, networks, and marketplaces, if I could go back and rewrite it, I'd probably just use one word, which is ecosystems. It is all about ecosystems. Ecosystems like, the one I run at HubSpot around like a software platform and people integrating with it, but also ecosystems like inside your company, ecosystems, as for like go to market, like how do you engage in other ecosystems as channels, for your products and services. And there's so much technology that's evolving around helping us create ecosystems and manage them and engage with them. So that's a lot of cool stuff. The great app explosion, it isn't just the MarTech landscape. I mean, the MarTech landscape is kind of one example of that. But essentially, we are headed towards a world where software is everywhere. One of the fellows at Forrester, Jay McBain, predicted that like, over the next 5 years or so, there'll be like 1 million SaaS apps in the market, because everyone's going to kind of have a SaaS app. The trend from big data to big ops, we talked a bit about that earlier. And then the harmonizing human and machine, to me, this is, it'd be easy to say like, well, obviously AI is going to be a big trend for this whole decade. But I think the part of it that I'm most excited about is, not just the AI capabilities themselves, but really, again, the sort of evolving playbooks of our relationship as professionals with these more and more intelligent tools. And how do we find these, optimize these combinations that between the AI tool and the human marketer you actually get a combination and a power that, you know, far exceeds like what the AI can do on its own, and certainly far exceeds what just, you know, us as mere mortals are capable of.
All right. In relation to that, what CRM systems and what platforms are we going to have in the future? Let's take a look at more than 10 years time. I mean, what's the future of CRM? What's going to be like? What do you think?
I feel like you're setting me up at this point to like, well, HubSpot, because I'm obviously biased on that. But, you know, I think I'll step back from the, you know, promotional message. I think the idea is really, and this speaks to ecosystems, but it also speaks to like greater configurability, which is software is going to be more and more tailored for each individual business. And so I think the future of all, like, you know, CRM platforms is they will give you this incredible set of capabilities, but your freedom as a business leader to like shape it and mold it to any specific needs, you know, that are unique to your business, it's just going to become easier and easier. I mean, don't get me wrong, we already see this today. This is a big part of what drives the ecosystem and custom developments and all these sorts of things. I think we're just going to see more of it. I think the platforms are going to do an even better job of enabling people to customize their digital firm to what makes them a unique and beautiful snowflake.
And in that direction, what do you think made HubSpot stand out as the CRM system for sales, marketing, customer service, which in fact for 2021 has been ranked as the #1 platform in the world, right? What helped us to become like this?
I mean, I think there's a technical answer to that, which is, you know, a number of other CRM platforms got created through acquisitions, right? You know, like, because we've seen lots of M&A across, you know, the MarTech space. And while that has the advantage when you're a company that's acquiring a bunch of other companies, it gives you an advantage in speed. Like, oh, yes, here, we got all these pieces. We can put it in one presentation. But behind the scenes, these aren't actually one common thing, right? They still remain separate products, separate stacks, separate architectures, you know, and behind the scenes, people are trying to like stitch them together versus, you know, HubSpot took a very different approach, and our entire suite is basically built from things that our team built. They built it on a common platform with a common architecture. The downside of that was it took much longer. Like, you know, it's taken HubSpot, you know, like well over a decade to assemble all these pieces. But the upside of it is now actually all these things are very coherent. And the fact that now when we open up that platform to third parties to be able to build apps and integrations, they're also able to leverage that coherent and consistent platform underneath. I think that's a really strong advantage. There's kind of a layer above that, which is, you know, more from a user experience perspective. You know, HubSpot just has a really great UX team, and they have long pushed against what we call the tyranny of war. You know, that like you can either have this powerful thing or you can have an easy to use thing, you know, but sort of you were being told in the market that, well, you can have power or you can have ease of use, but you can't have both. And our UX team has sort of pushed on that and said, like, you know, okay, even if you want to argue that's some sort of Pareto frontier, there's a lot of room to push the Pareto frontier further and further out, you know, and deliver more and more power and capabilities to people while still actually making it easy to use and coherent. And this, again, goes back to like, if you have a consistent, you know, platform under the covers, the ability to like really enforce, you know, that continuity, you know, from a user experience perspective, you at least have the option to do that. So,
all right, what would you say to people who say, I cannot really tailor HubSpot to the industry needs that I have?
I suspect that's changing very rapidly between like custom objects, between, you know, more of the developer APIs we have. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot more we can do. But yeah, the whole idea of being able to open up the platform is to say, HubSpot does a few things really well. Like we can understand like these certain use cases that we think will be horizontally applicable to a large number of customers. But when it comes to your individual business, your particular industry, you are always going to have greater insights of like, what you want it to do, than any, horizontal company can provide, and so it's really our mission between the ecosystem and the developer platform to give you the ability to say like, yes, please tailor this to what you want.
All right. And let's mention the HubSpot admins here. I think this role is going to be on the rise for the next several years. There are some myths, like, HubSpot still, I understand that it's very intuitive. It's very easy to use platform, but still you need to have someone with strategic mindset and a lot of technical capabilities to manage all of that, because, still it's a lot of tools sometimes that you need to connect, and HubSpot has developed and it's turned into really a multi-hub platform. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think about the role of the HubSpot admin? How is it different, let's say, from the role of the Salesforce admin or the traditional admin role?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the ease of use thing, it's a really interesting point, because we want to distinguish, okay, what are we talking about? Ease of use, like for a user who's like executing their day-to-day work. And then when we talk about admins and the people who are configuring these things, we want to make it easy for them to do the configuration, as far as the interface for it. But still, there's this thought that needs to go into like, okay, I have a lot of flexibility around my data model now. Like, what are the custom fields I want? What are the custom objects I want? From an automation perspective, what are the processes and sequences, that I want to orchestrate across my business? And that's really where the expertise, of the admin comes in. And going back to our conversation about, RevOps and automation and all this, ability for there to be a lot of value unlocked from these admin ops people who, like, it's not just managing the software, it's thinking about how to run the business, with these capabilities. And there I mean, those people are like golden at this point. There's such a valuable skill set in this like big ops world. So I think you're right. We're only going to see a tremendous acceleration, of that profession.
All right, amazing. Well, let's summarize it with several sentences. We are heading towards the end of this session. So, what would you say, like, as your message to people who are watching us and who are thinking right now how to optimize their tech stacks in the marketing, sales, and service departments?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would go back to the two things of really map the capabilities that you want to have for your customer journey. And then, from a tech stack perspective, the more you can orchestrate things around a common platform, I think generally the easier it will be for you to, get that value out of the whole and not just the individual pieces.
All right. Thanks, Scott, so much. And thanks for joining me in this first edition of RevOps Talks.
Yeah, thank you for having me as your inaugural guest. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.